So, if you've just tuned in, welcome on board. We have so much to talk about, big topics today hitting the headlines right now. Now, this show is all about opinion. That includes mine, theirs, and of course yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times disagreeing. So, still to come, it's time for difficult conversations. After a report highlighted failings over sex abuse in religious communities, we'll speak to two victims about their experiences. I mean, how do we make congregations more accountable? Difficult conversations, that's on its way. Also, Prince Charles and a former aide steps down from his role as chief executive of the Prince's Foundation. It's claimed that he helped to secure an honour for a major donor. Should there be more scrutiny of the Prince's charitable activities? And, of course, we want to hear from you as ever. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. So yesterday we discussed a difficult topic surrounding the shocking failings and blatant hypocrisy in the way major UK religious groups handle child sex abuse allegations, revealed a report last week. Now, the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse, or IICSA, said that some religious organisations in England and Wales were morally failing children. It examined evidence from 38 groups, including those from Christianity, Orthodox Judaism and Islam, and complaints included a failure to report allegations to police and a system that requires high levels of proof for the victim, but also allows the repentant abuser to remain within the congregation, at times without other members being told what they have done. So, in the case of the Jehovah's Witnesses, the church says that its elders endeavour to comply with the secular laws about reporting allegations of abuse, but survivors have said that that does not necessarily translate to helping the authorities. So joining me in the studio are married couple Becky Armstrong-Corbett and her husband Duncan. Welcome to the programme. It's really good to have you on board.
Thank you.
Now, first of all, are you both Jehovah's Witnesses?
We were.
You were?
Yes.
You were. So how did you meet, Becky? Did you meet within the actual...
Yes, we met within the Jehovah's Witnesses. We would have been late teens at the time. And then slowly sort of built up a relationship, didn't we? And
became friends.
Yeah.
Friends first.
Friends first.
And romance blossomed later.
Yeah. See, that's always the way. That's always the way.
Yeah.
Because I don't like any of my exes. They don't like me. I make friends. So talk to me about what happened to you. What happened? What happened? What's your story?
So I was brought up a Jehovah's Witness. My family are all in, so generations in, grandparents, etc. I was sexually abused between the age of 3 to 4 to the age of 12. And that was kept in-house. I gave a little bit of what happened to me to my parents at about 12. That was kept in-house, as we know that's what Jehovah's Witnesses tend to do. So it's all kept in-house in my case, and nothing was done about it. No report was made to the police. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I then gave my story to the Truth Project. They got in touch with the police with my okay. He was prosecuted and went to court, and he ultimately went to prison for 9 counts of sexual assault. So I eventually sort of got justice for what happened to me. But what's quite interesting about my case is some of the evidence that Jehovah's Witnesses gave to the IICSA inquiry was that they don't do any activities that separate children from their parents. Well, with me, my abuse took place in front, or next to, not in front of, but next to my mother. In actual fact, in the Kingdom Hall, during worship, where there were 70 other people there. So he used to sit behind me. I can leave the rest to your imagination.
That's horrendous. I'm so sorry to hear that happened to you. And people were not aware that this was happening?
No. No, he had a massive big Bible. He had his...
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Don't tell us any more. That's horrendous.
So, the point is that that kind of grooming and abuse can happen within, a public place. That's the point.
And how does that, and what's your story then? Because were you abused within the community as well?
No, I'm not a victim or survivor of abuse. Obviously, I've been affected by the abuse that occurred to Becky. I'm ashamed to say that for a long time I gave her the standard response of Jehovah's Witnesses when she would talk about how could this happen. I think in her mind she was already leaving the faith, as it were, but I gave her the standard answers and kind of dragged her back in, using my training and my upbringing. Basically, I said to her, well, it's just, it's the result of imperfect men, and the standard excuse is these things happen rarely. It's only since leaving that we've discovered it's not rare at all. So when you're in, you're told, oh, well, your case is an exceptional case, and you are led to believe you're the only one this has happened to. Once you leave, you discover, actually, no, there are hundreds of other people, possibly thousands of other people who have experienced exactly the same thing inside that organisation.
What is the reporting then? Because you must have told somebody.
So the way it was for me at the time, it goes to the elders. So my father was an elder, which is one of the religious leaders within the congregation. It goes to the elders. And then, as a 12-year-old, I had to sit on my own without my mother there and explain to these two men what had happened to me. So you're 12 and having to name parts of your body at 12 years of age, and you already dislike men, don't you, because of what's happened to you. The process at that time was that you then had to do your allegations again in front of the perpetrator. And then they decide whether there's a case based on whether there are two witnesses. They still use the two-witness rule. And of course, we know that sexual abuse usually doesn't take place in front of an audience, does it?
And how has that affected you? Because you seem quite like as though you've moved on. And I'm sure that has helped having a partner who understands the whole idea behind this. Jehovah's Witness.
And that's a really brilliant question, because most of us have moved on, and that's why we're doing this. I mean, I've trained to be a therapist and use my negative experience into something positive, turn it into something positive that I can help other people as well. And most of us have moved on. And the reason why we tell our stories isn't because we're stuck in the past. We're very focused on the future. We want to tell a little bit of our story to help people realise just how devastating sexual abuse can be, keeping it in-house, not having a law in place that makes it mandatory that we report childhood abuse, means that we want to tell our story so that people are aware, and the great British public aren't aware that there is no law in place. And Mandate Now, for example, made the comment that 80% of the world's jurisdictions have some form of mandatory reporting. So if a doctor or a teacher that doesn't report what's being said to them, there's no criminal charges that can be taken against them. Obviously, they're part of sort of organisations, aren't they, that they're registered with, and they could probably be disciplined through that. But it's not a crime to not report it. And I don't think the public realise that, and that's why we're telling our stories.
And it's quite frightening as well, because these are supposed to be religious settings where people are good and forgiving and truthful.
Absolutely.
And not abusive.
In fact, that's one of the things that comes out of the report. A number of core participant groups made up of survivors drew attention to what they call disguised compliance, which is really about the organisation giving the impression that the right thing is happening. It's all about public perception. I could illustrate for you how to make 2,000 odd accusations of abuse disappear. For example, what came out in recent news reports, outlets were reporting a headline figure where they said only 67 allegations had been reported to the branch office of Jehovah's Witnesses in 10 years. And that was based on what came out from the IICSA report. Their records showed 67 allegations reported to their branch office within the previous 10 years. But in fact, that's not what Jehovah's Witnesses presented to IICSA at all. If you read carefully, and you can follow the links, they're available on the IICSA website. If you read carefully, what they actually said was the branch office was contacted by congregation elders who reported allegations of child sexual abuse concerning 25 elders, 32 ministerial servants, and 10 other people where the abuse took place in an institutional context. So where the figure 67 comes from, imagine you start with a stack of 2,250 reports. Then Jehovah's Witnesses would look at that and they would say, actually, IICSA is only England and Wales. Their branch office covers Scotland and Ireland, so we can take off, let's assume the distribution is even, we'll take off 10% because only 90% of Jehovah's Witnesses reporting to this branch are in England and Wales. So we're down to 2,000
So
now.
they're basically sort of manipulating the figures to kind of suit their narrative. Or
Then,
the narrative.
Then you say, well, if the abuse was a parent, a step-parent, an uncle, a cousin, well, that's not our responsibility. We're only interested where it was an elder, a ministerial servant, or it happened in the context of worship. So now we take those 2,000, we can reduce that to about 200 because figures that came out from the Australian Royal Commission, where they actually got hold of all of the records, that showed that for every one person abused by an elder or ministerial servant, there were another 9 that were abused by somebody else in the congregation.
It's just so rife in this sort of...
So we whittle it down to 200.
I think it is about the setting that makes it so available to people to behave in that way.
I think the fact that it's always been a family situation, if you like, where you call each other brother and sister. So, you know, you don't want to believe that your own brother or sister has done something so horrific. But also, you know, you can trust your brother and sister, can't you? So, you know, when I was growing up, my parents called members of the congregation brother and sister, so therefore they were my uncle and aunt, you know, and they also fostered this sort of culture and belief that you can't trust anybody outside of the group. There's a psychological thing going on there as well, but you can't trust anybody outside of the group, and of course that also makes it very difficult for you to leave, because anybody outside of the organisation is either under Satan's control or worldly or a bad influence.
Control. So that's it, and you believe that because that's all you heard. So you actually believe that.
The official teaching, basically, there are only 2 organisations, is what you will be told if you're a Jehovah's Witness. There's God's organisation and there's Satan's organisation. God's organisation represented on earth by Jehovah's Witnesses, and if you're not part of that, then you're part, knowingly or unknowingly, you're part of Satan's organisation.
See, somebody else might look at that and say, how can you think that? How can you believe that? How can you believe that if somebody tells you that? Because if somebody told me that, I think that I'd be like, don't be so ridiculous.
How exactly. And I think that's a really interesting point because, you know, when we're growing up and we watch our parents do something, we kind of look at that and think that must be the correct way to do it. So we have these core beliefs that are built into us. And when you're part of a high control religion, you've got that core belief that's being dripped to you all the time. And so anything that's outside of that core belief, you can't accept it. You just ignore it, because it doesn't fit with your core belief. So if a child can, because for example, I was brought up, there's no abuse within our organisation. It happens in every other religion. And I obviously knew that that wasn't the case. But, you know, if somebody comes along and says, I've been abused, that doesn't fit your core belief, so you have to ignore it. And so what Jehovah's Witnesses will do when they're seeing us is they will go, well, that doesn't fit my core belief, therefore they must be lying, because they can't accept it. Does that make sense?
It does make perfect sense.
And that comes across in the way they convey this to their congregations too. It's their belief that elders and ministerial servants are appointed by Holy Spirit. So how could somebody appointed by Holy Spirit fool the Holy Spirit while they're being abused? So what they say to the congregation, they've recently published an article in 2019. And they said, you know, how can this happen? Even true Christians have been affected. How does it happen? Well, wicked men and impostors. God. And then they say, and then some have succumbed to perverted fleshly desires. And then we're going to consider how elders handle instances of serious wrongdoing, including child abuse. No mention that it might be an elder or a ministerial servant 100.
Well, of course, we had to ask the Jehovah's Witness, and this is the statement that we got. The statement said, when elders learn that someone in the congregation is accused of child sexual abuse, they immediately take steps to ensure the matter is reported to the external secular authorities as may be required by law, or if it appears that a child may be in danger of abuse. Elders do not shield a perpetrator from the legal consequences of his sin, do not interfere with the law enforcement, and leave criminal matters to the secular authorities. Any suggestion that Jehovah's Witnesses cover up child abuse or in any way discourage or frown upon reporting allegations to the secular authorities is absolutely false. The Bible requirement of 2 witnesses is related solely to a religious determination whether the accused should be expelled from being one of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and if one convicted of child sexual abuse is later reinstated, restrictions are imposed on the individual's congregation activities. In addition, elders may inform parents of minors within the congregation of the need to monitor their children's interaction with the individual. So that's what they say. We've heard you as well, and there have been others who have come in and talked about this too.
Yes.
We really thank you for coming in and sharing that story, and hope that it will empower anybody who hears the story to report abuse, and if they're in Jehovah's Witnesses, get the hell out of this.
Absolutely.
The caution is the word may.
Yeah, well,
As may be required by law.
well, we did see that, and it was spotted yesterday. Becky and Duncan, thank you
very
so
much.
much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, after the break, the Prince of Wales aide steps down from the